So this evening, with our props, 2 bricks of block and a bolster, we're going to start the evening sitting on the bolster. So you can, if you want to, sit exactly on the top of your bolster, or you can sort of sit a little bit more forwards, and that makes it a little easier to bring the heels into alignment rather than crossing the ankles, and you can get your shins down to the floor, so it stops you falling off the bolster further. If your bolster is fairly new, it will be stiff and strong and very round, so there's more chance that you'll roll off of it. If it's a well-worn friend, it'll be a bit like a bean bag and you'll sink into it, so that kind of changes it a little bit anyway. Just sit nice and tall. We're going to just allow ourselves to sit here, relax and breathe. We need to become conscious a little bit of our posture. We're trying to keep the body nice and aligned and just that little bit lifted without feeling like we're working any muscles particularly to hold ourselves here. So if you can imagine the gravitational line coming straight through from the crown of your head, down your spine, into your tailbone. We want to try and follow that line as best we can. And obviously we've got some natural curves in the spine, but notwithstanding those, we want to try and be as close to that center as possible. And then let the shoulders relax down a little bit away from your ears. So we're not pressing them down, but we're trying to let them go to see where they go. I notice in particularly if it feels like the shoulders are well aligned or different to that. You can close the eyes if you like. It does tend to create a little bit of sway from side to side. So if you prefer to keep your eyes open, that's perfectly okay. The eyes open if they were closed, and we'll begin some neck stretches. We're just going to take some very gentle stretches here. I'm going to let the chin drop in towards the chest, and then slowly draw my chin over towards my left shoulder. The eyes move along the torso, I'm starting to allow the eyes to move up the wall towards the ceiling, and then across the opposite wall. Being careful not to drop the head too far back, and I'm also working at a pace that allows the muscles and the discs to feel like they're gliding over each other. If you move too quickly, it can feel a little bit pinchy. We want to try and avoid that. You may need to take several breaths to move through the circle. Once you've arrived, we'll start to climb back the opposite way. and notice with interest whether that feels the same in terms of how freely it moves, and if there are sticky points. Are they more or less the same on both sides, or one side particular? And then we'll take one more rotation. We'll move the same way as we did the first circle. With luck, if there were any little niggles, we'll just let them iron themselves out. We'll lift the head back up again slowly, and we're going to untangle the legs. We're going to come into child's pose. So allow yourself to stretch the legs out first. You want to say hello to your knees and your ankles. Again, you might need to windscreen wiper them a little bit and give them a little wriggle. Child's pose, you could come all the way down to the floor, or you could scoot the bolster underneath your body if you wish. And try to have the knees relatively close together. If that's not good on your knees, you want to take that block and put that behind your bottom, so you sit onto that rather than your heels. That changes the ankles and the angles for the knees a little bit. And I'm going to see if I can bring my head to the ground and allow the forehead to touch, taking my hands down towards my toes. And I'm going to do my best to soften my body, but also keep a very long breath coming in. So it don't need to be a big, deep breath, but I'm trying to keep it long. So I might be consciously slowing that breath down a little bit. So I can feel the diaphragm expand and get this very nice stretch into my lower back particularly. The exhale, exaggerated long, just as a breath in it. And noticing how it feels on each side of the body. Does it feel similar? Or can we notice some differences from side to side? You can gently take the hands forwards and lift carefully back up. Moving on to all fours, I'm going to stretch the legs out again. So I'm going to take one leg at a time back. Just wait for the blood flow to come back into the knees. Doesn't take long. It's good to let the knees stretch out in a natural way rather than sort of pressing frantically back. And feel quite intense. I'm going to take the flat block. Place that landscape onto the mat. for the legs to come forwards. I'm going to come into a butterfly pose. So I'm going to bring the feet towards me. Comfortable distance, not super close in, not ridiculously far out. Going to rock a little bit, so I'm kind of moving more towards the front edge of the sitting bones. And I'm going to take a little breath and allow myself to fold down. So I'm going to kind of let the body slump first. Also going to let the pelvis move backwards a little bit if it can, and then drop the head in. I'm going to be here for a few minutes, just letting the body sink. So that feeling that we have in our yin practice where we move to the edge, we hold, try to relax there. The body eventually succumbs and the nervous system quietens. And then as we sink a little further in, the alarm bells ring and we go through that feeling of tension again in the body, which we just work release. And some people like to bring their arms on the inside of the legs. Some people like them sort of wrapped around the outside. That's a personal choice. I'm going to try and let the head hang as much as you can. So really think about where that head go. And see if we can conserve that slow breath. Plenty of room to breathe into the back of the ribs and underneath the shoulder blades. Let ourselves move out again. We use the hands to lift and unravel the spine. Let's bring the legs together. So again, we can use the hands under the knees. Stretch the legs out gently. Say hello to those ankles. Just give them a little roll round. And then we're going to come on to our knees again, but we're going to have that block underneath that bottom. We're going to turn that to portrait, and we take the block towards the heels. Now you can sit directly down if your knees are happy to do that, or you can take a brick and place that underneath your sitting bones so that you can sit on top of a brick and a block together. Again, just makes it a little easier on the knees if they're tight and the ankles. We'll sit up nice and tall. Now I'm going to float the arms out wide. We're going to take eagle arms and we'll bring the left arm across right arm over the top, crossing at the elbow. See if I can bring the hands together, the palm towards palm, holding the thumb if not. And if that's really impossible, then feeding the fingertips around the shoulders towards the inside edge of shoulder blades. But I'm going to relax the shoulders down and let the shoulders drop a little, and the elbows are just resting against the chest bone. I'm going to breathe into those shoulders. Now, it's quite intense. There's a feeling of the muscles underneath the shoulder blades that you don't have an awareness of any other part of the day, really. And release the arms out. And just let the hands sit on the side. So we'll try and let the shoulders relax. So we're not going to move them. I'm just going to let ourselves breathe. And then we'll inhale the arms out wide. Bring the right arm across and the left arm over the top this time. Then we'll just sit and relax. Sometimes that can be quite tricky. The temptation to stretch and move from a position can be quite intense. So practicing with the opportunity we have, be still on the inside and on the outside. Now I'm going to move off the blocks, not very far. I will stretch the legs out once on each side, and then just moving forward, so I'm completely off the blocks. I'm going to sit back onto my heels with my knees together this time. So stretching the ankles a little bit differently, and then leaning back, allowing the knees to lift from the ground. So I'm stretching into the front part of the ankle, going quite strong on the knees. And if you're like me and you have insanely high arches in your feet, it can be quite strong on some of the bones and joints in the foot. And then easing my way back up. And quite possibly needing to tap the toes out a little bit. I'm going to move towards the blocks again. This time I'm just going to tuck the toes underneath. I'm going to turn before I do that, my mistake, turn the block from portrait to landscape, and move my brick on there as well. You might not need to use the brick, but if you have it there to start with, then you can make the choice to remove it later. I just put my toes against the brick, having my knees wide apart as that block is wide. Put the toes underneath and then start to sit back onto the heels. I'm just going to walk the fingers in, roll the knees off the ground, and then hopefully my heels will move onto the block. And I'm going to sit onto the brick. I'm going to turn the toes out to the sides and allow myself to sit up nice and tall. Now, if you are able to squat because you have the articulation naturally in your ankles, and you can sit there for a reasonably long period of time because there will be pressure in the ankles and the knees, and not feel like it's binding your spine up or compromising your breath, then by all means you could take the squat in any fashion that feels good to you. So you could have feet almost flat on the floor, no blocks at all. Or we can use a slightly elevated version. You could just be heels on the block, no brick, or you could use bricks and blocks. Letting the hands or the arms rest onto the knees. Trying to let the knees rock out to the side a little bit. It's somewhat governed by the groin and the ankles in combination with each other. Trying to sit up tall again, thinking like we did at the beginning of the class about that line, that axis, that center that runs through the spine, and trying to move towards that, so utilizing the least amount of effort. Now, if you are squatting barefoot to the floor, becoming more upright, more and more of a challenge, it would appear, unless you're like my granddaughter, a year and a half old, who seems to be able to do that perfectly well. But I think that might be something to do with the fact that the bones haven't formed and the joints aren't quite as compact as they are in an adult body. As we started off ambitiously, and you found that it's getting a little bit boosty in your body, your nervous system doesn't feel like it's relaxed, it's kind of elevating, then perhaps thinking about being more gentle with your body and coming back into these supported versions. And let ourselves move from there. So hopefully that will be an easy process. Again, just stretching the knees out a little bit. And then once you've done that, we'll come down to the floor. We'll move the bricks and blocks out to the side. And I'm going to begin to use my bolster. So I'm going to take that across the mat, midway down. Give it a little bit of a thump to get it as low as I can. And it's called a resting Buddha. So I'm going to take my feet to the end of the mat, one leg just on top of the other, so I've got a nice bend there, not sort of the knees too high, they're just sort of 45-degree angle really. Heels pretty much on the center line, hip on the center line. And between the fleshy bit of your body, from the top of your pelvis to the bottom of your ribs, you want to sink that onto this bolster. You just want to lie it in gently and see where it comes. Sometimes you have to sort of test where that is. Now, if you come down and this is more sort of underneath your armpit, it's going to feel very intense and not comfortable at all. So you want to make sure that you are in the right place. Now, again, if your bolster is very new, you might need to not use the bolster and decide to use a blanket that's rolled up into a sausage shape. Maybe your spine just won't take the intensity of this. This might just be too high. But we're going to lay the head down onto the bottom arm, palm facing up. And then I'll take the top hand onto the hip. So the slower you come down, the easier it is, and the more sort of height you can have into that bolster. I'm going to take the top arm up and longer to increase the stretch a little more, and see if I can place the top hand on top of the bottom hand. I want to be careful that I'm not rolling the body forwards or backwards too much. So rolling into the chest or rolling into the shoulders. So it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I'm going to be here for a few minutes. So we're trying to relax the body down. Now again, this is one we haven't practiced this before. Can be a bit of a surprise on the body and the nervous system. And it can be quite a challenge to get yourself to that point where you start to relax. It usually takes a minute or so for you to confirm in your own mind as to whether you're going to be able to sit here or you need to change from a bolster to a blanket. You begin coming out of this pose and draw that top hand in front of me, wrestling in line with the face. Press down gently to slowly unravel the spine. It takes a little while for that bottom arm to come back in as well. You need the blood supply to come back, really to lift yourself up. And then allow yourself to come back to sitting. Now I'm going to just move myself to the other end of the mat so that I can still see the screen. If you're doing this at home, and you're just watching the recording, you've done it a few times, then you could just roll gently over to the opposite side to rearrange yourself on the mat. Again, we'll just allow the sitting bones to be on the center line. We'll fold those legs, looking about 45 degrees-ish. Not an exact science. Throw the bolster in, pummel it down a little bit. Slowly make our way in. The top hand onto the hip once we feel ready. And lift the top arm up and over. And I'm going to take the top hand in front of the face, let the shoulders rearrange themselves, take a breath in, use the exhale to press down into the hand and peel myself away from the floor. Just draw the upper hand back in, making sure that it's come back to life before I put too much weight into it, and coming back up to sitting. I'm going to move the bolster from across the mat to down the center line. I'm going to have it towards the front of the mat, so bolster's almost on the end. And we're going to take a rested twist here. Now you could, I will say this as for starters, you could elevate that bolster to an angle if you wish. And for some people that would feel nicer in the spine. A little bit lower becomes a little bit more intense. When you rotate round, you'll feel it in the lower back muscles a bit more, and it will hit the tendons and ligaments a bit more as well. So if you are happy to take it lower, then do. But remember, you could put a brick and a block underneath the front end of the mat and lift it up at sort of 40-degree angle. Also take advantage of just patting down the beams a little bit on this end of the mat as well. It's going to be closest to me. You want about a hand's distance, not an exact science, but from your finger to your thumb between the end of the bolster and your hip bone, which you want to try and line up roughly along the center line of the bolster, legs out to whichever side is easy to see me from. Now we're going to take the leg that is closest to the bolster and we'll fold that underneath about 90 degrees. So that knees are still raised at the moment, but it will change in a moment. And start to lean out onto the bolster and scoop the top leg out along the center line of the mat. Again, that knee is lifted off the ground, even though the bottom one has now come to the floor. Ideally, I want both legs to be knees on the ground. So I'm going to put a bend at this top leg. I've got a swastika shape through these two legs. And I'm going to turn the body slowly onto the bolster. Now you do want it a little bit offset so that in this case, I'm facing over to my right. So it's going to be sort of a little bit offset to the left. We can bring the body down. I want to lay the ribs into the twist. And once the chin comes down, I'm going to turn the head slowly off to the side. You can bring the hands underneath the head if you want, or you can take the hands out to the side and just lay directly under the bolster. It really is your posture. So it's a nice long twist. Just a long position twist onto that bolster. And again, I'm going to try and let the ribs sink down onto the bolster. Let my breath play its part. And I'm going to bring the hands underneath. Press into the floor gently with an exhale. Coming back up slowly. It can feel quite intense. The ribs and the neck and the shoulders take quite a lot of pressure in some unusual areas that I don't experience, certainly whilst you're sitting at a desk all day, that's difficult, something like that. And you could just roll it again, simply over to the other side. Or you can move the bolster from one end to the other. Again, make sure you've got that hand distance between your hips. Really quite key to getting comfortable. Bottom leg wraps underneath as we lean over and begin to start to take ourselves where we're going to go. Top leg swings out, down the line. We'll bend the knee, so we've got that, as I said before, the lower half sticker. Then a chest in. Towards the bolster, an easy way down. And turn the head at the last opportunity. Just let the hands be where they feel most comfortable. See how that feels in your body, where it wants to move to. We'll bring the hands underneath and press gently away again. I'm going to move the bolster to the front end of my mat. I'm going to cross the front edge. Next to take some short lunges from here. So up onto all fours when you're ready. We'll start going to the right side so it's easier to see what I'm doing. Knees underneath the hips to start with. Take a little breath in and then just simply move the right foot to the outside of your right hand, turning the toes out to the side a little bit. And tuck the toes on the back foot and just walk that knee away carefully and gently so I can drop the hips a little bit and I'll untangle the toes as well. I'm going to lean onto the bolster with my elbows. I'm going to make sure that that left elbow is underneath my left shoulder and then just take my right hand onto the thigh. And I'm going to try and let the hip sink towards the ground, whilst keeping the chest just sort of in the same position. So a little bit lifted, I guess, if the hips are sinking. That can be quite strong on the patella, your knee bone, on that rear leg. So you might find that you want to sort of roll your knee out to the side a little bit. Allow yourself to just find the most comfortable place you can for that rear leg. And then we'll bring the hands back down. And I tend to walk the hands back a little bit so that I can get into an easier position on the back leg. Bringing the leg out to the side gives it the most amount of space. A little wiggle from side to side. And then I'm going to move into the second side. So just gently taking the left leg forwards, toes out to the sides, lifting the rear knee, just wriggling the foot away. And down onto the elbows, making sure they're underneath the shoulders to start with. And then taking that into that gentle twist. And then it's time to come out of that side as well. Now we're now going to move into Shavasana. You could take that traditionally flat to the floor. I'm going to use the bolster for the final thing this evening by giving it a little shake first of all. And then taking it up about a third of the way in the front of the mat, so I can just roll my legs over gently. I want to have the bolster more sort of underneath my thighs. To start with, before I come in, I'm going to draw the knees a little higher, feet in a little closer, and bottom very close into that bolster. So I'm going to roll down, give myself enough space to just take the legs out slowly at the end. Just rolling out, and by the side of the body, a little wriggle out. Close the eyes, find a little shape, and then let yourself become still. Really returning to where we started in the class, and practicing breathing, being still, letting the effort release from the body, and noticing what happens in that space. How do we feel? We'll begin to breathe a little deeper, and allow the toes and the fingers to gently wriggle. Then we'll roll the wrists and the ankles around. We're just connecting with the nervous system back up from top to tail. Become a little more aware of your surroundings and your place on the mat. Allow yourself to take a longer breath and stretch in any way that feels good to you. And then, if you haven't already, we'll slide the heels along the ground, a leg at a time and over the bolster. We use the feet to snuggle the bolster in towards the front of the mat, and then allow the knees to come in towards your body gently. So nice, easy, slow, soft movement. Go rock a little from side to side. Take a longer breath. And then roll out to the right side. Just mindful of any props you might have lying around. And then test into that side of the mat. Bring your hands underneath and press lightly into the floor to roll as smoothly as you can back up to sitting. And sit in whatever is an easy posture for sitting. We'll bring the hands towards the heart to close our practice this evening. We'll let the eyes close and take a longer breath in. Begin to exhale slowly, letting the chin drop. And drawing the belly to the spine, we'll follow that bow to the floor, feeling our practice for the evening. As the breath comes back into the body, we'll let it build the spine for us. Until eventually it's easy to lift the head and open the eyes. Namaste. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you on the mat again soon.